Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Center for Fiction. My name is Melanie. I'm the Senior Director of Public Programming here. If you don't know us, we're the only literary nonprofit that focuses on the creation and enjoyment of fiction. And this month, the month of September, which is nearly over, we have a special membership drive, and we put these on your seats. If you live in New York City, you could have access to the most beautiful heaven for readers and writers upstairs by becoming a member. There's a special this month, so check it out. A special thank you tonight to Jordana and the team at Cafe Con Libros, who is our partner for this evening, and our sisters in bookselling. Yay. Jordana's in the back, and she's brought some tote bags, so say hi to her before you go. A couple of housekeeping announcements. We will have an audience Q&A, and if you're here, please raise your hand and someone will bring a microphone to you. And if you're on YouTube, first of all, hello. You may add your question into the chat at any time and we'll read that out. After the event, we'll have a personalization line outside. So if you want your book personalized, stay. If you just want it signed, Laura was kind enough to sign them before the event. All right, let me bring up our guest, Laura Warrell. Warrell is a contributor to the Bread Loaf Writers Conference and the Tin House Summer Workshop, and is a graduate of the Creative Writing Program at Vermont College of Fine Arts. Her work has appeared in HuffPost, The Rumpus, and the Los Angeles Review of Books, among other publications. She has taught creative writing and literature at Berklee College of Music in Boston and through the Emerging Voices Fellowship of PEN America in Los Angeles, where she lives. And she's joined by the fabulous Lisa Lucas, the Senior Vice President and Publisher of Pantheon and Shock and Books at Penguin Random House. Previously, Lisa was the Executive Director of the National Book Foundation, and we're really happy that she's pivoted and brought us this book, and welcome them both to the stage.
Thank you. All right. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. Welcome to New York.
Thank you. It's really nice to be back. I might move back here.
When was the last time you were here?
Like 20 years ago, I think.
It's
been a very long time. Totally. Everywhere I went, I had no idea where I was. I don't even know where I am right now, to be honest with you. Yeah.
We were just in LA on Saturday.
Okay, yes.
And you're doing a thing. A thing just happened.
I think that I wrote a book. I think it was this one.
Indeed. Congratulations. Yes, we can do that. Congratulations. Happy Pub Week.
Thank you.
So we're really, really, really proud of you. A lot of people from Pantheon are here. Thank you guys all for coming. We're so excited about Sweet Soft Plenty Rhythm, and it's so cool to see the books actually in the real world. Like there's just a stack of them, not in our office.
I know.
And not like mock-ups that we have on the internet or whatever. So I think we should just start with you reading a little bit.
Okay, sure.
Want to
Yes.
start from the beginning?
So thank you all for coming. So I think I'll say just a little bit about the book. Actually, no, I'm just going to get into it.
Go for it.
This is from the very beginning. I'm leaving a little bit out, so if you've already started it, this is going to sound familiar to you. So here's Sweet, Soft, Plenty Rhythm. The girl may have been the end for him. The end's beginning, like the bend of a road too slight to notice where it leads. She could have happened to him a day later or a day before, but she was there on that day, in that moment, just hours after Circus Palmer turned 40, a predictable time for a certain kind of end to come, and just seconds after Maggie slid her hand from his wrist and whispered, "I have something to tell you." Outstretched on a chaise longue beside the hotel pool, Circus watched from a distance as the girl, in her mid-20s, he figured, did cartwheels alone on the beach, her linen skirt falling open to bare the smooth plane of her hips and the slide of her calves sloping up to her toes. She lured his eyes away from Maggie, who was lying in another chaise longue beside him. All afternoon, Maggie had been acting strangely, staring at nothing and losing the thread of conversations. This wasn't Maggie. Circus figured whatever it was she had to say wasn't anything he wanted to hear, so he let his attention be taken by the girl doing flips back and forth across the sand. When she landed on her feet, her hair lashed across her back like a whip. Her shoulders lifted and hands spread beneath the melon sunset, as if she carried it on her fingertips. Hips Calves, toes, shoulders, hands. She circled in the air again. I wasn't going to say anything, Maggie hummed, the sound not fully making its way to him, not quite breaking through his focus. But I thought you should know. If she were any other woman, he would have told her to come to the point. But this was Maggie, so he waited, a sense of dread needling in his gut. Chewing at the inside of his cheek, always his mouth needed something to do. He concentrated on the melody the girl made inside his head as he tapped a nervous rhythm on his knee. Listen to what I'm telling you. The push in Maggie's voice, major-keyed and salty, brought Circus back to the cabana, back to the wild turkey warm in his glass, and Maggie beside him. Her lips were pursed as she stroked her long neck and watched the night begin to fall, possibly without noticing the girl, possibly trying not to. He'd come to Miami to draw a clean line between his first 40 years and his next, and he'd invited Maggie because she was the only female in his life who knew how to be easy. He didn't love traveling with women. A woman in the room meant ending the night back at the hotel where she was waiting. Sorry, baby. He stroked her knee. I'm listening. I was late, she said, so I took the test. He let out a hard breath he didn't know had been stuck in his throat and waited for her to smile, to laugh, to do something to let him know she was joking. I don't believe it. Believe, sugar. We're careful. Only sometimes. You sure it's mine? The corner of her mouth lifted. Nice try. I'll be damned. Circus opened his legs wider across the chaise. We're like a couple teenagers. A chuckle tapered out of Maggie's mouth with a velvety line of smoke. I didn't think it could happen, she said, not with the number of years I got on me. Baby, you're not of this world. Who knows the miracles that body can do? He took her hand, kissed the inside of her wrist, and linked his fingers through hers. I got you, darling. We'll take care of things when we get back to Boston. Maggie ashed the cigarette, winced. Right? The cigarette smoking between Maggie's fingers and the liquor in her glass reassured him momentarily, but then he noticed the edge in her gaze. Maggie, come on, he said. I'm thinking. What's there to think about? Don't talk to me like I'm a fool. You know nothing good could come of this. Shit, I already got a kid barely talks to me. Coco would talk to you plenty if you saw her once in a while. Jesus, Maggie, don't ask me to do something I'm no good at. I didn't ask you for a damn thing. Circus's body seized as if everything keeping him alive had shut down at once. He tried to stay calm, but felt like a cage was rising around him. He imagined climbing back through the moments of the day and settling into the space where he didn't know, so it wasn't yet true, where she hadn't yet told him, so he was still free. Don't do this to me, he said. Everything's about to happen. You know this. I got Peacock Evans trying to set me up with that producer in New York, so I gotta be ready, gotta focus. Man, just talking about it gives me the jitters. Circus lowered his voice. You got everything you could want in your world. You want some kid messing that up? You gonna let some kid get in the way of me finally having what I want? Don't mess with what we got. You're brilliant and kinky and don't need jack from anybody. You're my wildcat, Mags. Don't get soft on me. When Maggie turned her eyes, Circus knew he had the choice to take back what he'd said or let it widen between them. Maggie rose from the chair, her body blocking his sun. Say something else, she said. He took a defiant sip of his bourbon. You're no mother. Maggie collected her bag and stormed across the deck, back inside the hotel. He was surprised to feel a twinge of regret at her walking away, but a swig of bourbon took care of that. It was the dread that stayed in his gut and grew solid, so that the only relief came from down the beach where the girl was pinwheeling through the air.
All right. So Circus is kind of an asshole.
A little bit.
Circus Palmer's kind of an asshole.
He's a little bit.
Why did you decide to write a book about an asshole?
I didn't write about an asshole. I wrote about the women in an asshole's life.
Right on.
Because nobody ever talks about the women in an asshole's life, right? And so, he is an asshole, right? If you've read it already, you're probably struggling with, do I keep reading this? This guy's an asshole. That happened as I was trying to get the book into the world. But I wanted to humanize him too, right? It wouldn't make sense to write about a guy who's just a jerk and gets his comeuppance. That wasn't interesting to me. Right. But what I did want to understand is what makes a person, but especially a man, right, behave this way. What is it about this person? What is it about our culture? What is it that makes a person get involved with other people, see that those other people want something from them, and that those other people are feeling something really necessary, and they're not getting in return what they want.
Yeah.
But I also, more importantly, wanted to talk about those women, because as I said, before, or I've said a lot of times as I've talked about the book, we've got so many stories about men who are struggling with their desires, and they just can't stop themselves, and I get it, right? And I get it with circus. But I feel like very often when we tell those stories, we don't talk about what it's like on the other side. We don't talk about what it's like when you're sitting at home crying and wondering why he isn't calling you and why he doesn't understand that you care.
Right.
And so, yeah, I wanted to write about the women.
And you talked a little bit about, so in all the press that you've done, you've talked a lot about sort of having a breakup and dating a musician and thinking of circus, so I don't mean to steal your story, but no, because I'm going to ask a second
question. A lot of people
question.
here I'm seeing know that already, so yeah.
Which is why I asked the question that way, but I talk about that, but you said this is a book you needed.
Right.
And it's not a book that you had. Why did you need it? Why is it a difficult book about love and sex and misbehavior and all of these things that we find sort of unpleasant, even if we live them? Why did you need that?
I think because I feel like generally a lot of stories that are told about women in relationships are either dire, right? They're really struggling and they're in these really pathetic situations, or they're struggling and they're eating ice cream with their best friends. And that's the extent of it, right? That's how we deal with and process our difficult emotions, right? And I didn't feel like there's often a lot of depth. And I am a very emotional person, and I haven't always made the best choices in my relationships. And I know that I'm not alone. I know that you have. She's my new hero around that. And I just felt like, I want to read about women like me and the women that I know who are really trying to overcome some things, to understand some things, and to relate in ways that are a lot more meaningful and richer, right, than what we see presented to us a lot in culture. I feel like, I'm not trying to suggest like, here it is, finally, this is the book that we've all been waiting for. I'm not suggesting that, but I do feel like it's harder to find stories about women in relationship that are really exploring the dimensions of what that experience is like, and that's why I needed it.
Yeah, and it's messy. They're messy.
Yes.
Even the women are messy.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And how often do you feel like, in a just interpersonal context, like Black women or women of color or a multi-racial environment is allowed to just be messy without being racialized?
Hard, yeah. And, it's funny, there was it Racialicious? Was that a right?
Yeah,
That's what it was called, right? A while ago, years ago, and Racialicious isn't around anymore, I wrote an essay called, they titled it, "Why Can't Black Women Claim Sluttiness?" And it was at a time when there were a bunch of books coming out written by women who had gone through a slut phase, but now they were married and they had kids and everything was fine, right? And I felt like none of them are women of color, right? And it feels like as women of color, a lot of us think we're always in slut phases, right, unfortunately. But I think the other piece is we don't have as much flexibility around how we present ourselves in relationships, and especially with men. In fact, I remember a Bell Hooks essay that I read a long time ago in college, so you'll see how old I am, but I forget what the title of the book was. But she was talking about Madonna, so there you go, I'm not 25, and how Madonna was able to sort of, she sort of envied how Madonna was able to embody all of these different types of being a woman, right? She was taking them on and off like costumes, and didn't feel like she had that freedom as a Black woman.
Right.
And I could really relate to that, and I don't think I'm alone.
And how did that influence how you drew some of these characters? Like Maggie, which
Yeah.
you just read from,
Right.
is pregnant.
Right.
And not sure she's keeping a baby. And she's
Right.
smoking and drinking. And
Right.
like, that's just not a thing you see. Like,
Right.
that is a thing that happens,
Right.
absolutely. And it's not even really something to judge.
Right.
But it's just not something you ever see representationally.
Right. Right. And I think, I think with all of these women, and it's a diverse cast, and I was conscious of, and I wanted it to be a diverse cast, right? Because that's really important to me. It's the world that I live in. But I was also conscious of how these relationships, how these dynamics are going to change based on the woman's, background and what her experience is, but not only culturally, but just in general. And so, there are some differences. I think, for example, there's a character named Peach, and she's a white woman, and she's very sexy and is sort of objectified throughout her life, and she's in her late 20s, and so she's starting to realize, I think I have a problem with this. And so, but I think that might be different, right, if she were from a different cultural background. So I think these different experiences, I think I said in an interview, your experience of romantic rejection probably, maybe we can talk about it later, but is different, I imagine, depending on, I know as a Black woman, the experiences I've had in my romantic life are not very similar to some of the white women that I'm friends with. And they say things to me, and I'm like, it's not the same for me. You know what I mean? And so I was conscious of that with all of these characters.
And what do you think setting them all, setting, Pia and Maggie and even young Coco and Josephine and all of these women, Peach, together, what does it tell us? Like, what do we learn about the women from looking at all the women next to each other? Because they couldn't be more different from each other. And I'm going to ask you more specifically about all of them.
Okay. So, somebody asked me the other day what brings them all together. And I think what's beautiful, right, is what brings them all together is that they've got some kind of internal challenge, whatever you want to call it, that's pulling them toward this person who's not giving them a healthy relationship, right? Who's not giving them what they want. And I think if you put them all in a room, they would probably have that in common and really gravitate toward each other. And so I think that's what brings them together. Yeah.
All right. Well, no, we're going to get back to the women.
Okay.
But I want to talk about Circus.
Let's do it.
Who is Circus?
Who is Circus?
And why is Circus?
Who is Circus? Okay, so Circus is a trumpet player. He's a little damaged, but I didn't want that to be the excuse, and I didn't want that to be have compassion, right? I wanted him to be a really rich, interesting, authentic character. So, he's got some damage. If you read the book, you'll see it trickled in there. As I've said before, I don't really like those kinds of scenes in the movie where you here's what happened to him when he was a little boy, and so now you understand. Right. So there are those moments in there. But I think he's a man who loves women. I think he's somebody who thinks that he is. He's being honest with them, right? With every woman that he comes across, he's honest about what he can offer as far as a relationship goes. And I think this happens a lot, right? I've told you what's available, so if you're still here,
right, it's your fault.
I've done my job, right? But I also kind of think that he is the kind of guy,
he is really the distillation of every terrible dude.
He's not that bad.
No, he's not that bad, but the behavior, the behavior,
Yeah.
not necessarily the core guy, but finish.
No,
I just was like, you said it, and I was like, ooh.
He does a lot of mean, terrible things. But I guess, that's part of it, right? It's part of writing. It's like actors, right? That I have to find. That's why I love him, just like I love the women, right? I understand him, or try to, just as much as I understand the women, because I want him to be. We need to understand why 10 women are gravitating toward this guy. And so, to me, he's somebody, like I said, he tries to be honest. I think he's genuinely attractive and charismatic. I think he's a technically talented musician. I don't want to say too much, just not to give a lot away, but I think he's very charismatic. I think he's sexy. Right. He's smart.
At a glance, just because he's kind of a dog and you're a normal person.
Right. I'm not a dog.
No. you couldn't be more different. So how do you figure out how to write him? Like, where do you relate?
I think I relate in a couple of ways. I think I relate to, you know, I mean, it's been 25 years, right? So I can relate to, should I give up now? No, I'm going to keep trying to do this, right? I'm going to prioritize this over other things. I get why, as a creative person, you would not necessarily, I mean, I don't do this, but I could see how everything else sort of pales in comparison, right? Being in a relationship pales in comparison. So I get that. I get what would be, I mean, I just had a conversation. I'm a loyal, person. If I'm in a relationship, that's it for me. But I understand being like, gosh, this is really hard not to explore other options when they come across my path. And I think I told somebody recently, one of the scenes that happens in the book is based on a real experience with a friend of mine who's a musician, or a poet actually, and he's a really good poet. He's amazing, he's a slam poet. And he is just really sexy, and very often he would play with musicians. And I was at an event with him, and I was sitting behind him, so he was up there, and he was just, reciting his poetry, and I just looked, and all the women were just like, and I just thought, wow, that I get why it would be hard, right? I mean, you have a room full of people who are enamored of you. And I think, and it's probably especially hard because it's not just, hey, I'm a cute guy. He's like, it's my music, right? They're into me, they're into my music, and so I get it on that level, yeah.
Interesting. And he's a jazz man. I mean, this is, I love jazz.
Yeah.
I come from a jazz person.
Yep.
Like, it's important to me as music, but it's not like the hippest thing that's going right in the world.
Right.
So why jazz? Because it's like an art form that people don't always access really easily.
Right.
It does have that sexiness.
Yes.
But why did you pick jazz, knowing that?
Yeah. So I think the primary reason is that I also love music. I love pretty much every form of music. I think, every type of musician can be charismatic and sexy. But there is something particular, I think, about jazz musicians in that, well, I think in some ways because it does feel obscure to people. Every person that I talk to, especially when I was writing the book, was like, oh, jazz, when does it take place, right? So there's this idea that, oh, is this the 1920s? Is this the 1950s, right? It's like, no, 2013, people listen to jazz, people play jazz. And so, and so part of it, and I played with that, right? Because all of the women are having their own relationships with like, do I like this music? What is jazz? Why does it play jazz? And so I liked that. That was part of the reason. I also think it is really compelling. I mean, like I said, if I'm listening to musicians and I'm enthralled, but with jazz musicians, I don't know, there really is just something about, it's kind of to me like ballerinas or poets or painters. Like, how do you do that? I can play the piano, I can, read sheet music, I can even come up with a song if I want to, but I don't know how you play jazz.
Right.
You know what I mean? What comes out of you and how it works for you. Yeah. And so I just find that really compelling.
Yeah, and then the novel itself, right, is structurally unique.
Yes.
And does that feel like a part of the sort of jazz improvisational structure?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So you have like, each chapter is told from a different woman's perspective. And so there are a couple of ways to look at that. But musically, right, it's sort of like everyone comes up and takes a solo, right? This is me, this is how I'm going to play this song, this is my interpretation of Circus as a piece of music, right? And relationships and that sort of thing. And so it does kind of mirror it in that way.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And was it hard to write in this form? I mean, it's like, so you're sort of, some characters flow through, some are just here for a moment. Right. Like, why did you sort of decide to give people more time or less time, or even these brief interstitial moments where we see some of the women?
I think I wanted it to cohere more. I know I wanted it to cohere more, right? And I, especially as I got deeper into it and realized that he had a daughter. So Coco is his daughter. She's 14 years old. And
are there any Team Coco people here?
Yeah, if anybody's read it, yeah, we've got some Team Coco people.
Team Maggie?
Sure. Yeah.
Anybody? No,
oh,
just
wow,
me.
It's usually she loves Maggie.
I love Maggie.
Yeah, so I think that, wait, what's
Sorry,
the
you were
question? I was
talking about the
getting lost in
parenthood.
Team
I
Maggie.
totally was like a
That's
Team
okay.
Coco moment, but you're talking about the relationship between Circus and Coco.
Right, so I mean, I think that, I don't think that's what it was.
Or Mom and Coco. We were talking about Coco. We introduced Coco.
Oh, that Coco was last. Coco was one of the last characters. And so originally I was kind of thinking of him having a kid. And I thought maybe a son, but then I thought that was not as interesting. And so I wanted him to have this daughter. And once she emerged and I started getting to know her, I couldn't just have her show up once, right? And so, and his relationship with her just kind of deepened. And so part of her emerging was really tying things together more tightly.
Right.
And so primarily you've got Circus, right? And then you've got Coco, who is his daughter. And then you've got an ex-wife, who's Coco's mother. And then you have Maggie, who's pregnant. So that's sort of like those are the primary relationships that he's kind of, well, avoiding, but we could also say maybe working through. And then we've got all of the other women. And so once I sort of started tightening that central kind of crew, then it really did start to cohere.
Right.
And everybody else was like, okay, then who else needs to come back, right? In order for these stories and the overall plot to move forward and get where it's going.
Who was the easiest voice to nail for you?
Weirdly, Circus.
Why?
I don't know.
Huh.
I don't know.
Are you Circus?
Am I Circus? I'm Circus. I think I'm a little
I'm
bit of
just joking.
everybody.
Yeah.
But I am a little bit of Circus. Yeah, because and not in my relationships, but I like to be free, right? I like freedom. I get the idea in other areas of my life, like in my work. I'm an adjunct professor. What could be more like, and then they evaluate me, like, you're gonna evaluate me? Like, all I do, I go into the class and I teach, that's all, that's the arrangement. And so I get the idea of freedom, right? Just wanting to live the way you want to. And I also think I studied so much. I really studied a lot about jazz. I really tried to understand him, and I spent the most time with him, right?
Right.
Because even though he's not always present in the chapters or not, as engaged with whichever woman we're focusing on, he's there, right? And so I think maybe I know him best.
Right.
And so his voice came easily to me.
And he's also a person of color in his 40s, trying to make art. It's not easy.
Which is hard.
Right?
Yes, and I get that.
Right. There was a
We
long
do have
road
a
to
lot
this
in
book,
common. A very long road.
but we're here.
A very long road.
So what was the hardest one, if Circus was the easiest?
So Maggie was hardest. So Maggie is the woman who's pregnant, and she is a drummer. She's very successful. She's a lot more successful than he is. I kind of based her on Cindy Blackman, who played with Santana and Lenny Kravitz and others, and she does her own music. And I wanted Maggie, because I didn't want all of the women to just be these sad sacks who are, pining away for this guy. And so Maggie is incredibly strong, and she's very confident, and she's not internally conflicted. She's a person who's got her act together. And so she finds out she's pregnant, and she's going to decide what to do, right? She's not going to struggle, and she's going to decide what to do. And that was really hard to write, both from the level of craft, right? Because to me, plot really revolves around conflict, and if you have a character who's not like desperately internally conflicted, that's kind of challenging, right? But then the other piece is, I'm not like her, I don't have that level of confidence and just, and so it was really hard to write some, like, what does she say? How does she act? What would she do? To be somebody who's so together and so totally free in her selfhood.
So we've talked a lot about the lovers.
Yeah.
Right? But not necessarily about the daughter.
Yes.
Right? And everybody, I guess, there's many daughters and a son. But, why is Coco important? Who's Coco and why? Well, we talked about Coco being Circus's daughter, but why is she important to this story that's really about love and sex and making your way through the world?
I've thought a lot about that, and I have been asked, and I have an answer that I never really thought about but feels right, which is, and again, this isn't entirely fair to say, but it kind of feels like part of it, which is, it's right around that time, right? 14, 15. You're starting to get into relationships, you're starting to have crushes, you're maybe starting to explore your sexuality and your relationship life. You still don't know who you are, and it's formative, right? So the choices that you make and the things that happen are potentially pushing you into directions. And so in some ways I think of Coco's story is Coco, which direction is she gonna go, right? Is she gonna end up in a book like this in 20 years, right? Because she's, connecting with men and chasing men like Circus, or is she gonna get out of it, right? So when she does really becomes an adult woman and is having relations, healthier ones than the ones that her father offered, not only her, but the other women in the book.
Right.
So I think that I kind of like that dynamic of thinking of Coco as like the before, the other women as the potential after.
Right. There's a choice being made,
Yes.
for sure, and Coco's definitely going through it.
Right.
So I want to talk about audience a little bit. So obviously you talked about needing a book for you, but even publishing this book, right? Like thinking about the diversity in it, and is it a black book? Is it a women's book? Is it literary fiction? Is it you have to make these choices. Who do you think that the book is for? In a perfect world where everyone was just open, who are you writing to?
I really hope everyone, right? I really hope that everybody sees something in it. Like I said, I hope that Circus is authentic and interesting and engaging, and not like men only read about men and women only read about women, but if you're interested in reading about men, I think Circus is a compelling character.
Sure.
But I imagine, I wasn't sitting there writing for women, but yeah, I think it's a book that women will hopefully see themselves in. And that's another thing. The two questions or things that people said, the first was, why jazz? When does this take place? And then the other was, oh my God, I need to read that, right? Because so many women have been in relationships like this. And so, as I said, my hope was in turning the tables, women can sort of say, oh, that's like me, and I'm not alone, right? And these are our experiences. It's so satisfying, right? And fulfilling and healing to know that when you're in challenging situations, you're not the only one. This is common. This is common.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm asking you leading questions because I am really interested in the racial identity of this book. It's like we're two women of color, right, that worked on this book.
Right.
With a whole bunch of other people who are all here. Congratulations.
Yes,
Thank you so
thank
much
you.
for everything. But it does feel like it means something, right?
Yeah.
It's not a book that's obviously a black book.
Right.
Here we sit.
Right.
We didn't really say, a black woman is, a young black girl coming of age or a biracial girl coming of age. We didn't hide any of the race of it.
Right.
What do you think that, what is, just when thinking about putting a book into the world, just as an author, what do you think of the way that it has to be put forward as a black woman? And the way that people perceive it, it's funny because it's it's one of the first times I've looked at a book like this and it's just it doesn't mention, the write-ups, they don't mention anything about race.
Yeah, that's
And is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It's, it's an interesting question to me.
It's interesting because I have an essay, I don't know if I have the courage to write, sort of knocking around in here, about being particularly a black artist. And I think I'm in the camp of wanting the freedom to be an artist, to be a writer, right? And if I want to write a book that takes race on as a theme or as an exploration, I want the freedom to do that. And if I want to write about something else, I want to do that. I don't love questions, so you're black, what's it like being black, and doing whatever it is you're doing. You know what I mean?
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Exactly like it is for you.
Yeah, right, because it's this is what it's like for me, but it's going to be different for her and everybody else, right? We could be in the same situation, we're going to have different circumstances. I've been really pleased so far, right? Because I feel like one of the struggles in getting here was, this has been, I'll just be frank, I know a lot of people here, and I keep seeing people oh my God, hi. But anyway, my whole life has been who are you? What are you? What are we supposed to make of you? What do we do with you? Why did you make this thing like that? Right? And it has been...
Too black, not black enough.
Right. It's incredibly...
Ambiguously black?
Yes, everything, right? And it's just I just wrote this. Can you just read it? If you don't like it, you don't like it.
Right.
But rather than, don't even look. There's the pitch, don't even look. Just read the book and see if you like the book. That's who I want to be in the world. And like I said, maybe there will be a book where I'm exploring other things, but right now I would like to just be the person who wrote that. And like I said, I was very conscious of race as I wrote it, and I am in the next thing that I'm working on, and also equally so, and it might come out a little bit more than it does in this book. But yeah, for sure, it's been a challenge. And
what does that mean for the characters, though? Because it's like you're sort of just like, I refuse to sort of to politicize this more than I need to, right?
Yeah.
Like you have a politic. There is a strong politic to writing a book like this as a woman of color in the United States of America in 2022, right?
Yeah.
And getting published.
Right.
But, you know, what does that politic mean for the characters? Like, what does it let them do that they might not do in a different book? Or if you weren't coming from a perspective where you felt bound by, you know, politics or identity, like, what does it let Maggie do? What does it let Pia do? What does it let everybody do, whether they're white or black, whether they're whatever?
Well, I think that's what it lets them do. I mean, I'm letting them do what I want to do, right? I mean, Maggie is black, and Pia is white, right? So Maggie is the woman who's pregnant. Pia is Circus's ex-wife, right? She's carrying a torch. She has been carrying a torch. She's not moving on with her life. And, you know, I think that, as I said before, when race or cultural background was relevant, I brought it in. But I guess I want to free them to have those experiences. But I guess I just want readers to take them as they are and recognize when, you know, I mean, Coco is a mixed race girl like I was, right? And so there are moments where she's not thinking about it at all. And then there's a moment in the book where she's on a beach with her mother, who's blonde. She looks like January Jones in my mind. So she's blonde and very pretty, and she's with her sister, who's also blonde and very pretty, and their daughter, who's blonde and very pretty. And Coco is feeling like, wow, I'm just this blotch in this family, right? And so I want her to be able to inhabit that, and I want the reader to inhabit that with her. But then when there are moments where that's not what's happening for her, and whatever the challenge is, you inhabit that too. And I feel like as writers of color, the only moments we're allowed to inhabit are like, well, how is this, you know, impacted by race? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And I want it to be like,
on some level, I think it would have been easier to write flap copy, like biracial girl coming of age, trying to figure out, you know, what she is in a white world, and it would just been like, you know, because it's so easy to write a review about that. It's so easy, you know, and there's room for that literature. But it's also, we have to have so many different voices,
that's how
which I
I
think
feel.
is really important.
Yeah, for sure.
What were you reading along the time that you were writing this book? Like, who are the people that you look to? I always like to hear what people are reading and like what their influences are.
What was I reading? Gosh, I don't even remember. It's been so long now.
Talked about bell hooks a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I read. I mean, bell hooks. Yeah, I've read a lot of bell hooks.
Same girl.
Yeah, well, Toni Cade Bambara, I kept going back to. There were some books that I kept taking out off of the shelves. So yesterday I was in DC and somebody asked me about writer's block. And my trick with writer's block is that I take a book off the shelf until I find a line that's like, oh, that's getting toward where I'm trying to go, right? And so, and it triggers something and I can keep going. And so some of the writers, there are some books by Danzy Senna that are on my shelf that I've come back to. Again, Toni Cade Bambara, I come back to for lots of things. Then there's this writer named Gina Barrio, who I really don't know a lot about her, but I discovered her when I did my MFA. One of my mentors suggested I read her. And same deal, like she writes a lot about women and relationships and very sort of sensual. So I turned to her. Somebody's name just came into my mind and then it went right back out. I also turned to a lot of poetry.
Yeah.
And then I listened to a lot of music. I mean, one of the things that kept bringing me back to
the soundtrack.
Is listening to music.
Were there any jazz tunes you were listening to in particular?
So I decided that Circus was really into Lee Morgan. We didn't make a Spotify list for Circus.
I know.
Our Spotify list.
We mean to. We intend to.
Yeah.
We will let you know.
We
if
made
we do.
one for the women. So if you want to know what the women like, that's going to be available. We'll figure that out.
Yeah.
But but yeah, so for Circus, yeah, I was listening to that. I think he's kind of a traditionalist. So I was listening to a lot of the early guys,
Yeah.
you know, and Miles Davis and all that kind of stuff. But then when I would write from one of the women's perspectives, I would listen to music
That they
she
would-
likes,
yeah.
right? Or that reminds me. To me, there's a feel to people. And so
What
there's
does Pia listen to?
the Cranberries, Jewel. You could learn a lot, I think, from these characters, knowing what they listen to.
We have to do more. Maggie.
Maggie. Okay, so all right, this is fun. All right, so Pia listens to Jewel, Nelly Furtado, that whole world. Maggie listens to jazz.
Okay.
And I sort of, like I said, I really saw her as Cindy Blackman. So Lenny Kravitz. And then Coco. I don't want to spoil anything. I'm not going to spoil anything. But that song, all the little kids. What was that song? Pumped Up Kicks.
So sorry.
You know,
you
know
know
it.
this? I don't know. I was not
everybody
able to
knew
divine
right?
that from any of that.
All the little kids with the
You're gonna do it again.
pumped up kicks
You're just
and
like
got the
here to sing on stage.
Dancing in the
Not
morning.
me.
Coco likes that song.
Okay. Does Coco like Harry Styles?
I don't think she likes.
Oh, well, Harry Styles wasn't really.
Harry Styles wasn't. Yeah, so 2013.
Well, he was in One Direction back then.
Yeah.
Did she like One
might have.
Direction?
Were they 2013? It's Coco.
Coco's in the front, honey.
Coco's in front. She likes Rihanna. This is all off the playlist.
Yeah.
And she likes Lord.
Oh.
She likes that song by
Okay.
Lord.
Uh-huh.
Dun, 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 dun. And then, who did we? Oh, Peach. So
Right.
Peach is a bartender. She's in her late 20s that he picks up. And she likes, like, the Black Keys.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And
So-
it really helps. Those are little things that I do to get into their characters.
So before we do Q&A, I want one more question, which is, who's your favorite? That's not Circus.
My favorite character?
Yeah. Who's the favorite of the women? Not the hardest, not the
Yeah.
easiest, not the most there, just your favorite.
Probably, I admire Maggie, but I think that
Coco's your girl.
Coco's my girl. Like every time I did bad things to her, because that's what you have to do in fiction. You can't be nice to people, right? You can't be nice to your characters. I would cry. Sometimes I would cry, like, I'm really sorry, Coco. But it's fiction, right?
We got a job to do.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I gotta
Coco.
write a book. But yeah, I really felt for her. And I really wanted her to do well. It's a weird thing as a writer. Like I'm in this weird thing now. Like I feel like I'm doing this for my characters. It's a weird thing. Like I really am very attached to them. They feel very real to me. And Coco did especially.
Did you feel like Tracy Flick came back? There was a new,
Yeah.
brought a book, and
That's
then,
right.
Les
Yeah.
is back.
Yes.
Where's Coco now? Which door did she go through? Do we
Oh,
get
I'm
to
not
know
gonna
which
say.
door? No, we don't get to know.
I'm not going to say.
Will you
But
tell-
I know.
Will you tell me?
I think I'll tell you later.
Okay.
If you've read the book, come and I'll tell you.
Right on.
But I think I know where they all are. I think I know where they all are.
Yeah, but I mean like 20 years later.
I know where they are.
All
20
right.
years later.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, now it's your turn. So we're going to do some Q&A. I think there's a floating mic right there in the back. So raise your hand if you have questions, which I hope you do, because it's always so awkward when no one does. Oh, there we go. Brave soul saved us all.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name is TC Mann. I actually just got done interviewing you for Pen 10.
Oh,
So I
hi.
absolutely loved your book.
Oh,
so
thank
I'm
you.
curious about Circus. How did he reveal himself to you when you first were meeting this character? And how did you get to the point of really settling in that this is going to actually become something more than somebody, well, fictional, but
Yeah.
fictional in terms of not actually a novel yet.
Not actually what?
A novel at the moment.
So how did he come to me, you said? So it's no secret that I was having a relationship with a musician, and he was seriously less talented or interesting than Circus. And so...
Every time she disses this dude,
I
it's the
love
best.
it. He better not be. I hope nobody told him in Boston because that's where I'm going next. But But I like him. I mean, clearly he was a nice guy. But I knew that I wanted to create a character, and I wanted to write a novel, and I wanted it to be interesting. And so I needed to really not use that guy, right? So it was sort of like, well, what is it about this guy that is compelling, right? And how can I translate that into something that makes more sense, right? And so jazz was one of the very first things. That guy was a rapper. And there's nothing wrong to me about rapper. He was like a white rapper. He thought he was Eminem. He was not.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Wait, Circus was originally a white rapper?
No. She's like, this is over. Throw it away.
I'm sorry, I just
Contract
died
revoked.
on stage twice. What?
No. The guy that I was involved with was a white rapper. I probably won't say that in Boston because everybody's going to know.
Maybe we just, let's let
Okay,
him
forget
be.
it. So anyway, so the point being that I needed to have a character who it made sense that a lot of women would want to, spend time with. And so, like I changed the music.
I'm sorry.
All right, well, I won't say that again. This is all between us. Just this room, it doesn't leave
Nobody
this room.
tweet that.
Yeah, so I changed the music, and I just, like I said, I tried to think of, well, what is compelling about a guy like that? What is compelling about these kind of characters? Because I did want it to make sense that these women are so into him, and I wanted it to be she's not going to get over it.
No, I'm actually dying thinking about this being a book about a white rapper instead
We would
of
not be sitting here, right? We would not be sitting here.
I'm done, I'm sorry.
Okay. So anyway, yeah. So that's how he came to me. And then I just started, the jazz really helped. A lot of what I do, once I sort of decide something so crucial to a character, like their job or what they're really into, then I start researching that. So then I started doing a lot of research about jazz and jazz musicians and started sort of picking things that I thought would be interesting to include in Circus's character. And he really started coming to life once I did that. Yeah.
Awesome. Another question?
Hey, thank you so much for a captivating talk. I was curious about, you're very open about it being based on personal experience and personal relationships. How does that feel as you come out as a public person, as an author, to be open about that and not just be like, this is strictly fiction, I'm an artist, I craft this.
Yeah.
Because I feel like as a woman especially, it's hard to be taken seriously as someone who writes from personal experience.
Well, one thing I will say is that despite the fact that the idea sort of came from a personal experience, there's nothing in here that happened to me. I'm not actually any of these characters, and none of these, I'm not in here. I'm not in here, my relationships aren't in here. But I guess I'm being frank about that and a lot of things. I don't know, I can't think of a way to talk about how the idea came to me that feels authentic, without sort of talking about the fact that, I was in a relationship. Because I feel like, for a lot of writers, that's kind of how it is, that you're living your life and you're engaged in whatever it is you're doing, and you're also observing it and thinking about it and wondering why it's happening and what's going on with this person and why am I doing that, and I just want to deconstruct that. I know so many writers, right, that it's like, Steve Almond, who I'm talking to in Boston, is like, write about what obsesses you. That's what I was kind of obsessed with at the moment. And especially why I wanted it to be, we're knocking that poor guy in Boston, but the reality is I didn't want to write him or about him or the relationship. It was just an idea that thankfully he brought me, right? And then he's gone, and it's just this character and these stories, and working through ideas that I think are interesting and characters and stories that I think are interesting. So the only truth, right, or not truth, but the only personal thing that I'm revealing is that, at the time I was in a relationship with a musician who was slippery, is the word I like to use, and he gave me this really great idea. But there's nothing in here about him, about the relationship. That's total fiction. So,
Quick secondary question.
Yes.
How does it feel to have people assigning like fictional things to your life because they imagine it's about you?
I think that happens to every writer. I mean, I think it happens to every writer.
Yeah.
I think people just assume. I mean, I've shared stories with people and they've gotten offended. I'm like, but this isn't about you, right? I think everybody does that with fiction writers. And I think for sure we often do hide between or behind our books and like, oh yeah, this is total fiction, and it all happened to you. I can say once again that didn't, but I'm not surprised,
Right.
you know, and it's fine. I don't think that there's anything.
Charge it to the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey. So yeah, there were a lot of questions about like what was the first spark, and I'm equally interested in kind of on the other end in the revision process. And so one of my questions would be like, how long did you revise? Like how much changed, and also like how much feedback would you take in or leave out, and like what kind of feedback givers did you have in your circle?
Thanks. So, this book did go through a lot of revision, and I think by the time, well, going back a little bit, I started it when I was doing my MFA program, so I had some feedback there. And then once I had a draft that was working, there were people, other writer friends, and I also just like to show it to people who are not writers, just to sort of get a reader's point of view. So I had a lot of people like that. But then it really did keep evolving. Like I said, the first drafts, there was no Coco. It was just the women. And so eventually, like I said, I really wanted it to cohere more, to feel more like a novel. And so that meant leaving some stuff out, putting some stuff in. So there were, I don't remember, no, it was pretty solid by the time we got to you, but it took me about 3 years, if you smush the time together, to write the book. And then it took me 2 years to find an agent. And then through that process, I was sending it out, getting feedback, making revisions, sending it to my own little posse of readers to get their feedback, revising it again. I paid a book doctor to read it and tell me what's wrong with this thing, because people are not taking it, what's not working. Yeah, I mean, this has not been easy. So I really believed in it, and I really wanted it to work. I knew what I wanted to do, and one of the things that I kept telling my friends here can vouch is I kept saying, if they could just tell me like that they see what I'm trying to do and tell me what I'm doing wrong so I can get there, you know? But I did a lot of it on my own and with the friends and people that I had in my life to read. So it took about 3 years to write, constant revisions throughout that process. And once I started looking for an agent, constantly revising. There are chapters that were in one of the last drafts that are gone now to make it tighter. And then has been great working with Lisa, and my editor, Deb, is right there, in a mask. She was amazing.
I love Deb.
Yeah, and so a long journey, but I'm hoping that it's working.
What do you think it is? Other questions?
Hi. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Kind of following up on that question, how did it feel? It's so great to see you two in conversation on stage. How did it feel to finally have it seen? And Lisa, if you can also talk about what it was like what you saw in this book that made you want to champion it.
Sure.
It's right there.
I keep getting asked about it, and the honest to God truth is I was going through a miserable breakup. I was miserable, and I was dating a guy that was horrible. And I read it, and I was sad, and I was stuck in Los Angeles, and I was in the middle of a pandemic, and I had just started a new job, and I read this book by a black woman who was talking about the stuff that mattered to me in a beautiful way, in a literary way, and in a way that I think may have been difficult for a lot of other readers because it isn't specifically black, it isn't specifically women's fiction, it isn't specifically literary, it isn't specifically anything. And I don't know, I have a hard time hitting things on, on the nail, whatever the expression is. What is it?
On the nose.
Hit the nail on the head. I'm not
head.
good at doing that straightforwardly with anything that I sort of like or enjoy or do. And it just felt really, really, really subversive to me. And I know that doesn't look like a subversive book, but this to me was like a pretty significant act of defiance.
Yeah.
You know? And I thought that Laura's voice was incredible, and I thought that she was talking about stuff that mattered to me and writing about women who were, you know, a little bit tough and older and like just living, and it mattered a lot. And it just like you said, you needed a book. I needed a book. You know, it's like there have been very few books that like speak to the sort of romantic or spiritual or, you know, sort of like, or the fact that it's different for me to date than it is for white women. And like you can say that until the cows come home and nobody will ever believe you. It is different. And this is a book that acknowledged that.
Yeah.
In a lot of small, tender little ways. And I just thought it was really something. And it's stunning to me the number of people that didn't see it immediately over the years. Obviously, you know, when we saw it, there were all sorts of things that Deb and Laura worked to tweak, and, you know, nothing comes in and goes out the way that it comes in, so that seems really standard, but there was nothing that I saw in that initial manuscript, you know, or even if it was like 2 steps worse earlier, that would have been something that just didn't seem like an obvious thing that the world should have. You know, so that was my impression, and you know, it's like, I think for me it's really important as a new publisher. You know, it means something to me that I'm sitting here with the first book that got acquired on my watch with a black woman, right? Like, it was never not going to be that. You know? And so that's why. And I think you're a terrific, talented writer.
Thank you. Thank you.
And, you know, to you.
So Neela, who is from Los Angeles, so thank you very much. She couldn't go to my event in Los Angeles. That's a good friend. Thank you very much. Yeah, give her a hand. Thank you. So it feels really good. I'll be honest. I have been waiting to be nervous about these events, and just in the elevator, it's like, I think I'm just happy. And it's like, the nervousness is going away because I'm happy, you know? I mean, it's been forever. I mean, my mom is here. I can't look at her because we'll cry. But I was like 6, writing, and then, you know, I wrote books in every grade, and everybody, there's my friend Eric, he knew me in college. I was writing a book. So, you know, every step of the way, I have always been working on a book. And it took a really long time. And I feel a little nervous about how much I'm thanking people, because I don't want them to think it's not genuine, but I'm really effing grateful to everybody at Pantheon, to Lisa, because this was really hard and also incredibly important. This is who I think I am, right? And what brings me the most meaning. And so the ability to finally do it it makes my life feel meaningful. So I feel really grateful, incredibly grateful to be here, and thanking everybody who helped me get here. So thank you.
Well, I'm really fucking grateful too.
We're allowed to cuss.
All right, I think there's maybe time for one more question, and there was an arm that shot up over there, so.
That's Marco, who came all the way from Italy?
Italy.
Thank you, Marco.
My question is, what would be the best advice for other artists, and especially writer, to don't give up? Because I know how much this is mean for you, and how long it takes. So what would be the advice for other artists?
Yeah, so I think that the thing that I keep saying is don't give up, but I want to drill down more, because I think we tell people that, right? Well, just don't give up. And people go, okay, great, I'll just sit here not giving up, right? But I think for me, it was, I have to get better at this. Do I have blind spots, right? What am I not getting? What's not working about this particular thing? What am I not getting as a writer? I went back and I had 4 books before this one that I tried to get a publisher for, or an agent for, and I couldn't. And instead of going like, oh, I mean, I did that. But also, like, what do I need to learn, right? And so I went back to school. I got an MFA. And to me, part of it is that you love the art, whatever it is, so much that I respect writing. I respect writers, right? And I want to be good at it. I don't want to just have a book in the world. I want to be good at this. And so to me, it's continuing to work on the craft and getting better at it. But then the other thing I think is important, because it really hurt me a lot, was not being able to distinguish between business decisions, right? Publishing is a business. Art is a business, right? They're all businesses when you try to access the public. And my identity, right? The quality of my work, potentially. And so I feel, there was a woman in DC, a very young woman, who came up to me and I didn't tell you this, but she came up to me after my event yesterday and said, I feel like everything I do, I just keep being told it's not good enough or it's not interesting, and I just don't know if I should keep going. And it really, helped to hear how long it took me. But I think part of it was, and what I said to her was, there's you as a writer and what you do, and you've got to hold on to that. And yeah, try to make it as good as you can, but you have to also understand that the market isn't necessarily a way to judge the quality of your work or whether or not you should continue. And so you've got to do that for yourself because it means something to you and you love it.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. One more round of applause for Sweet Soft Plenty Rhythm and Laura. Woo! All right.
Oh my God, thank you both so much, and thank you all. And I know you want to get your books, so here's how we're going to do this. You go out the back door and to the bookstore counter to get a book, and you come back in here to line up to get it personalized. If you already have a book, you can go ahead and line up right here by these doors. And don't forget, you get a $10 voucher toward the purchase of the book when you bought your ticket here. So thank you all so much for coming. Thank you both very much, and we'll see you at the signing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. All right.
All right. Good job.
All right.
So
I don't know how he did it.